Kia ora tātou te whānau, ko Miranda Harcourt aho. I am an actress, I'm a director, but predominantly now I am a coach, an acting coach, to draw out the best performance from other people, and that's where I find my joy. I started at Toi Whakaari New Zealand Drama School, and I worked very early on in the history of the New Zealand solo show, the TAHI Mahi. So Verbatim began, its very first performance was here at Bats Theatre, the beautiful Bats Theatre. And where did Verbatim start? Well, Verbatim was written by William Brandt. It was conceived by William and myself, and it was then followed later by another solo show called Portraits, which was written by myself and Stuart Mackenzie. And these shows were both verbatim shows, and verbatim, as you all know, means as it was said. So you were recording exactly what was said by the interview subject, and then as a performer, you're replicating as closely as you can the real words, the poetry of the real words and how they were originally spoken. So it's a kind of a hybrid of journalism and acting. And it still remains now my favourite theatre practice. So Verbatim began because I had just come back from overseas in 1992. I returned to New Zealand having spent a year studying at the Central School of Speech and Drama, studying drama therapy. I worked in a prison, Wormwood Scrubs, maximum security prison, and then I went back to work at Brixton. I worked with children in a school for deaf children. I worked in a pre-release unit of a psychiatric ward, and I also worked in a home for profoundly disabled adults. So I had a lot of therapeutic practice to add to my my work and my experience as a performing artist, and that outward flow, where your primary concern is not necessarily about yourself as a practitioner, about what you have to say, but your flow is reversed towards using theatre practice and performing arts practice to educe responses and experiences from other people. That idea of reverse the flow has remained with me through the rest of my creative life, and I'd say that is the core of any success that I've had in the multitude of different things that I've done within this this area of work. And that was reflected when I came back to New Zealand and wanted to go into the prison system and interview not the family of the offender, which at that time, 30 years ago, was the predominant way that people were encountering news about violent crime. William and I were interested in encountering the family of the offender as opposed to the family of the victim. And we knew, I knew from my experience in the prison system in Britain, that if we took a story of the family of the offender into the prison system, inmates, both men and women, would be more interested in listening to the story of this crime. So we spent quite some time working on the show. We received funding from the amazing justice system at the time. Kim Workman, who was at the head of the justice system, gave us $35,000 that we could go to a number of prisons around New Zealand and interview people who'd been involved in some way in the commission of a violent act. And from those people, we were able to connect with family members, with sisters, with wives, with mothers. Interestingly, not very many fathers were in the mix then as now. So father absenteeism became an interesting theme in the backstory of the project. And having engaged in that research practice, then William and I carved out, we kind of like slivered away at the core material until we had, I think there are 9 characters, some of which are on the radio altogether. There are 6 characters, I think, who are on stage who were personified by me, the solo performer. So William carved and crafted an hour-long experience of meeting those people. And then the creative process went from the writing, kia ora William, the creative process was shifted to Colin McColl, who was the director. And it was Colin's job to find a way to craft the performance and craft the vibe of the show so that when we took it to prisons or schools, it could be very responsive to the needs of the environment. So that meant that sometimes it was in the round. If that was how the location was set up, or that's how the people in that particular prison wanted to experience it. Sometimes it was in traverse, sometimes it was end stage. It would change every single time. Now that brought up some interesting challenges for the design of the show. And something I still love about Verbatim is that in order to design it, we went to Merylyn Tweedie, who's a New Zealand visual artist, like a really amazing New Zealand visual artist. And we challenged Merylyn with creating an environment that was easy to carry around with us from location to location, and also with creating something that was almost self-lighting, because we knew that we would be performing in prison kitchens or outside, as we did when we toured the prisons of New South Wales, or in a hallway. We knew we were going to be in all these random places. So Merylyn went to a few Newtown op shops and chose a single piece of furniture for each character as a representation of that character's space. And then with all of these random bits of furniture, she applied a technique that she was very well known for at the time, which she called blonding, which was just getting some matte white paint and really badly painting each piece of furniture, so that when they were all together, they were diverse, but they were united by the fact that they all emitted this kind of self-lighting element of being badly painted white. And I've actually still got that set in my garage at home, and I often look at it and go, wow, that was just, it was genius. I love what she did. And at the back of the performance, if there was a back of the performance, sometimes it would have to be on the floor, she made a long, long banner. And on the banner were the verbatim words, the final line in the show, if is such a big word, it's just such a big word. And I could always hear people, whether they were in schools or whether they were in a prison, they would sit down and they'd start to read the words on the banner at the back of the room. They'd go, if is a very big word. It's just such a big word. It's just such a big, they're like, what? What does that mean? And then the show would happen in space-time. And then at the end of that hour of performance, that's the final line of the show. And you could see people going, oh, right, now I get it. If is such a big word. If things had gone in a slightly different direction, I might not be here now. So themes of choice and active engagement with the direction of your own life were very much in that banner and in the central makeup of the show. So what are some of the challenges that confronted Colin, the director, and me, the performer, as we were working on making the show, lifting it up off the page and allowing it to exist in space-time, as opposed to purely as a text, or in the world of Verbatim, a kind of a very rough-hewn piece of beautiful poetry put together by the writer? I guess some of those challenges were working out who is each character talking to. So what we were trying to do was allow the space around each character to shift and change as each character took their space to talk. So for Cherie, who was Aaron, the central character, Cherie was his girlfriend, and so we were asking the audience to willingly suspend their disbelief and allow themselves to suddenly be in a different space. For Cherie, the audience is suddenly in a poke bar, listening to Cherie talk to her best friend about how her relationship with Aaron fell apart. For May, Aaron's mother, suddenly the audience is invisibly in her living room as she sits hunched over the heater, smoking in the winter. For Aaron himself, suddenly the audience is in the prison with him, responding to William and me as we were conducting our interview. So you can see that the requirement of the audience is the audience itself is asked to assume different personae through the way that the show flows on. Actually, we rehearsed the show, here I am right now at Bats Theatre, and we rehearsed the show just up the road, a couple of buildings up the road at Cubewell House, in a little 40-seater cinema there. I don't know why there was a 40-seater cinema in Cubewell House, but that's where we rehearsed. And that was, there were two things that were key to the challenges associated with making the show. Number one was who was the audience at any given time, and so who was the solo performer speaking to, just as I'm speaking to you through the wonders of modern technology. And the other challenge was how to shift the nature of the characterization in me, the performer, to suit each character. And that's something that I've carried through to my practice. Even yesterday, I was running a class on exactly this same challenge or provocation. And the tool that we used was with the tools of Rudolf Laban, the great movement psychologist and inventor of a way of writing down movement, where we worked with space, with time, with weight, and with flow. And we identified first what is Miranda's relationship with space, time, weight, and flow. And then we worked out what was each character's relationship with space, time, weight, and flow. And we found ways to alter my behavior to suit each of those characters. So what I think Colin did so beautifully in that show was that in between, as I shifted from one character to the next, he choreographed that moment of change. And I've very rarely seen that in solo shows since, but it meant that there was a kind of a fluid dance element to the transitions from this gesture from one character, which then becomes this gesture from another character. So you have a beginning and an end to each gesture, and that becomes like I say, the sort of fluid spine of movement through the existence of the show in space-time. So that's, looking back, I guess, that's one of the things that I think Verbatim achieved from a performance perspective, apart from what it achieved from a social perspective. So that's Verbatim. On our team were Colin McColl, William Brandt, Stuart McKenzie, Miranda Harcourt, and Merylyn Tweedie, and the many techs who assisted us on the nearly 10-year life that Verbatim had as a solo show, touring through the prisons and schools of New Zealand. It was a blast, and Verbatim has left a mark on my soul even to today.